Being a science communicator on YouTube who talks to a lot of theist apologists, I very often hear the Kalam Cosmological Argument for the existence of God. Except that it's not exactly an argument for the existence of God, and we'll get to that. The Kalam Cosmological Argument, sometimes just called the Cosmological Argument for those unfamiliar, was popularized by William Lane Craig, very, very famous Christian apologist. Covered him on the channel before. Kind of a disgusting human being. Check that video out if you want to know the details for why. But William Lane Craig popularized this argument, which essentially goes like this. 1. All things that begin to exist have a cause. 2. The universe began to exist. 3. The conclusion, therefore the universe had a cause. Which the observant viewer may notice is actually not an argument for the existence of God. Now, there's a lot of introduction of some more assumptions, a lot of mental gymnastics to go from the universe had a cause to that cause was a personal, all-knowing, all-loving, all-good God. But yeah, that's what the Christian apologists are trying to do. The primary Kalam argument just concludes with that conclusion that the universe did have a cause. But is that a good argument? No. No, it's not a good argument. I have really big issues with both premises. I think that both premises are not true, or at least not justifiably true. So I thought, you know what? Let's try to take a crack at fixing the Kalam cosmological argument. Let's go into each one of these flawed premises and fix them to make them true. And let's see if that alters the conclusion at all, shall we? Let's find out. So premise number 1. All things that begin to exist have a cause. Sometimes alternatively worded that whatever begins to exist has a cause for its existence. So that's the first premise. Now, there are already a ton of very obvious flaws with this. Namely, what are some examples of things that have begun to exist, right? Like, we could just throw out a random example like a chair, like the chair I'm sitting on right now. That's a thing. A chair is a thing. This chair is a thing. And it began to exist, right? Somebody put together this chair or was assembled at a factory. So to what does the chair owe its existence necessarily? Because existence was already a property that all of the parts of the chair had before those parts were simply rearranged into the chair. And you say, well, look, if it's made out of wood, then that wood came from a tree, and that's where the wood was created. But then, again, you deal with the exact same problem. The wood is made primarily of carbon atoms, and those carbon atoms already existed in the air, in the carbon dioxide in the air. That's where the tree got the material to make the wood, and so on and so on and so on. You can continue to trace this chain all the way back, and you will not find a verifiable instance where you can say, yes, this is when this thing began to exist. The creation of the chair was not some ex nihilo creation out of nothing. It was just a rearrangement of previously existing parts. In fact, I would say that there are 0 examples of that, 0 verifiable examples of anything coming into existence from nothing. So really, the first premise should be amended thusly. Premise 1. All things that begin to exist are created from other previously existing things. You can't really point to an instance where a thing has actually come into existence ex nihilo, like is proposed by the theists or at least the creationists. People might point to virtual particles, but those are not real particles. So virtual particles are not an example in quantum mechanics of things coming into existence from nothing, despite what the pop sci science journalists want to say about it, okay? There is no known example that I know of. I mean, leave it in the comments if you think that you have an example of a thing coming into existence, but I'm not aware of any true example of a thing coming into existence. When we colloquially say that things come into existence, like this chair came into existence, what we actually mean by that, what is meant by the sentence, this chair came into existence, is actually this chair was assembled from pre-existing parts. That's what is actually meant when we say that this chair began to exist, that this chair was created. We really mean that this chair was that the physical parts were reassembled into the form of this chair. Now, what about premise 2, right? Premise 2 was that the universe began to exist. Now, on its face of it, a lot of people might have learned about the Big Bang as being the beginning of the universe. But does the Big Bang actually make any such claim? When you get right down to it, most theoretical physicists, astrophysicists, and cosmologists agree that it does not. The Big Bang does not make any claims about where the starting energy of the universe came from. It starts at the initial condition of the universe existing in a very, very small, very, very dense, very, very hot state. In fact, the actual physics that we need to describe this state break down, and we're no longer able to describe the very, very smallest, hottest, densest states about what is actually physically going on. So without that more advanced physics necessary to describe what's going on, you really cannot make any assertive claim about any kind of beginnings. It's only intellectually honest to be agnostic about whether or not our evidence or theories today point to a beginning of the universe. And again, most cosmologists would agree with this. Oftentimes, the Christian apologists will bring up something called the Borde-Guth-Vilenkin theorem, which is exactly what Frank Turek brought up in the video in which I spoke with him. And in that video, you can see that both Guth and Vilenkin, two of the physicists that came up with that theorem, explicitly clarify that their theorem is talking about inflation. Their theorem necessitates that inflation had a beginning. It does not make any such claim about the universe. In fact, Vilenkin very clearly explains that the theorem is agnostic about the beginning of the universe as a whole. In fact, there's no evidence or reason suggesting that the universe itself had a beginning or has to have a beginning. You can have a past infinite universe that is logically possible. There's nothing in the actual evidence, the scientific evidence, that says that that is ruled out. Based on the currently available evidence that we have today, the only honest position is to say we don't know whether or not the universe had a beginning or not, or if a beginning was even required. So, now if we fix premise 2 based on the actual available evidence and most up-to-date science, premise 2 now reads, the universe may have begun to exist, although we cannot know for sure. So now let's put it all together. What is the new, fixed, updated, and accurate version of the Kalam Cosmological Argument tell us for its conclusion? Let's summarize. Premise number 1. All things that begin to exist are created from other previously existing things. Premise 2. The universe may have begun to exist, although we can't know for sure. The conclusion that logically follows from these premises is the universe may have been created from other previously existing things, although we cannot know for sure. Isn't it strange how when you update the premises of the Kalam Cosmological Argument to more accurately reflect the most current up-to-date understandings of science and philosophy, all of a sudden the conclusion is quite sensible indeed. I don't think anybody would take any issues with such a conclusion in the fields of science or philosophy. It's no small wonder that the Christians don't want to go anywhere near it, because all of a sudden, it's going to be pretty tough to figure out a way to smuggle your God into that conclusion, being that the conclusion of the actual accurate argument is just so much more reasonable. So guys, I hope you enjoyed my fixing of the cosmological argument. You can bust this one out whenever any creationist tries to pull the Kalam cosmological argument on you. Just go ahead and show that their two premises are wrong, and then you can show them what the actual correct and accurate premises should be, and how that kind of slightly changes the conclusion and takes all of the wind out of their sails. Anyways, until next time, guys, have fun dunking on the apologists, and stay curious, keep learning. And subscribe, and hit the bell. I don't really say that very often, but people have been saying that they're not getting notifications when I upload, so be sure that if you are subscribed, you have also hit that bell